Good afternoon. Thanks, Trey, and everybody else for having us today, working with us to put this on. My name is Jason Brinkley. I'm a partner with Snell & Wilmer in our Denver office. We are a firm of 430 attorneys across the West, headquartered in Phoenix and in just about every state in the western United States. I am a native of Lamar, Colorado, so it's good to be on the Eastern Plains, and I hold the Eastern Plains near and dear to my heart as I talk to Trey about that. And I want to echo Trey's comments. This program that we're going to talk about today as part of the Tax Act has a lot of potential to encourage private investment in eastern Colorado, both northeastern Colorado, southeastern Colorado, southern Colorado, even the western slope, and also provides a lot of opportunity for the money that's already here to be reinvested here and grow in very unique ways to preserve the wealth and the way of life that has been out here for generations. With that, I want to introduce my colleagues. Rebecca Elliott, who is an associate in our Denver office, and then my partner Mark Schultz, who's in our Phoenix office. At its core, the Opportunity Zone program is a tax issue. I'm not a tax attorney, nor do I want to play one here with you all today. So that's why we brought Mark out here, because he is a leading expert on this. So with that, we will hand this over to Mark, and he'll walk you through the program. And Rebecca and I will jump in from time to time and talk about just kind of more transactional or business, kind of boots on the ground concepts that you all can think about as you're talking to potential businesses relocating out to northeastern Colorado, or if you're looking to start businesses or take advantage of the opportunity zones and funds. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. So again, my name is Mark Schultz. I'm a tax attorney with Snell & Wilmer. And at first I had to check to make sure I was wearing matching socks. So I'm kind of surprised I am. So I'm a tax attorney. I do a lot of sophisticated real estate transactions. Been practicing since 1997. Used to live in Chicago. I practiced in Chicago for a while before moving out to Phoenix. And I started doing something called tax credit financing. And there are a bunch of tax credit financing programs. These are federal income tax credits that are purchased by banks to finance different types of transactions. One of them is affordable housing, rental housing. They call it the low-income housing tax credit. There's another tax credit called the historic tax credit, and that is a tax credit for renovating historic structures. You have the renewable energy tax credit, and then there's something called the new markets tax credit. And new markets is it's a subsidy program, and it's for a bunch of different asset classes. A lot of folks use it for commercial real estate, industrial real estate. And so this particular financing program has a lot of similarities to the New Markets Tax Credit program. A lot of the rules, a good portion of the rules are exactly the same as we have in New Markets. So that's what drew me to this particular program. It's an incentive program. And so let's get started. We'll talk a little bit. So this program was created by a group out of DC called the Economic Innovation Group. It was started by Sean Parker. Folks may have heard his name, Facebook, Napster. Sean Parker made all his money in Silicon Valley. And I don't think he's from Silicon Valley, but he's always been concerned about why is there so much private capital available in Silicon Valley, but if you look around the United States, there's this lack of private capital in certain zip codes. And so he created this group to come up with a program to try to solve this dearth of private capital And so he hired a couple of policy experts from the tax side. So no surprise they came up with a tax incentive. And so basically it's an incentive for folks to invest in businesses and real estate in certain areas around the country. And so they created this legislation called the Investment and Opportunity Act. And they did it at the latter part of 2015. In 2016, they drafted some legislation, and they had, back in the days when you had bipartisan support, they had bipartisan support here. So we had, in the Senate, we had Senator Tim Scott, on the Republican side. On the Democratic side, we had Senator Cory Booker. And then in the House, we had Congressman Kine and Congressman Seabury. And so those four put together this legislation. We had some momentum in 2016, but that was an election year, and so nothing really got done. They reintroduced it in 2017, February 2017, with almost 100 co-sponsors. Again, all bipartisan support. And then when we got to the summer of 2017, if you remember, Congress decided to take up health care. And so that was the big agenda item. So this just got shelved. And then we got into late fall of 2017, and everybody started talking about tax reform. And both Senator Scott sat on the Senate Finance Committee, so that's the tax writing committee for the Senate. And then Congressman Seabury sat on the House Ways and Means Committee, so that in the House, that's their tax writing committee. So we had two competing pieces of legislation. The House bill, which was coming out, the bill that was coming out of the House had stripped out a lot of incentives. So my recollection is even taxes and bonds were stripped out of that bill. But the Senate bill is the one that really prevailed, and that's where this Investment and Opportunity Act was located on the Senate side. And Senator Scott, when we went to what we call our joint committee, so that's, when the House and the Senate meet together and come up with a bill that's going to be presented to the President, Senator Scott had a seat at the table, was a conferee in that joint committee, and was able to protect this Investment and Opportunity Act and make sure it was in there. So then we got to the end of 2017, and we had the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. So that was passed December 22nd, right before Christmas, right before New Year's. Of course, no one reads anything until January, and this was buried in 600 pages of legislation. There was 6 or 7 pages of that 600. And so it really wasn't until the New York Times had an article, I think it was mid-January, when the New York Times did an article on this particular program, and then everybody realized, oh, what is this? What is this incentive program? But it was actually, for the states were on a 90-day time clock to submit these particular zones. And so they had 90 days with a 30-day extension. And so it wasn't until, I think we were back, I think it was May, maybe late May, when we had all 50 states had submitted and had all the zones certified. And this doesn't just apply to the states, it also applies to U.S. territories. So Puerto Rico, the island of Puerto Rico is considered an opportunity zone. So we have this federal program, and now the question is, what is the program? And so the way the program works, and some of the earliest version of this program was a more simple structure. It was basically individual invest in a business or a real estate transaction in one of these particular zones, and then gets an incentive for doing that. And when Congress really got involved, Congress said, we want this intermediary in between the investors and the projects. And so they created this thing called an opportunity fund. So the investor invests in the fund, and then the fund there invests in the project. And so those are the steps. But then the question is, what is this incentive for the investors? And so the best way to explain this is to give you an example, and it involves, if I bought Apple stock for $1 million, and I sell it for $3 million, and I've got this big $2 million gain. If I don't do anything, I'll pay tax on that gain when I file my tax return for this year, which will be April of next year. But if I invest in a fund, then I get to delay when I pay tax. I get to delay that when I become subject to tax. So that means in April of 2027, when I file my tax return for 2026, I'll have to pay tax on the sale of stock I had this year. So I get to delay my tax rate, and that's always good. The second benefit is that if I invest in a fund this year or next year, when I do pay tax on that $2 million of gain, I'll pay tax on 85% of that $2 million. So I get a little bit of a reduction, and that's good too. If I invest in 2020 or 2021, I still get my deferral, and I get my reduction, but it's only a 10% reduction, so I pay tax on 90%. And if I invest in 2022 or later, I just get a deferral. That's it. I get a deferral. I still have to pay tax in 2026. So I still have this date where I have to show up and give the government money on the gain I had from the sale of my Apple stock. But I get to push it in the future, and I get a little bit of a reduction if I invest, in the next few years. Now, the big thing that people are really talking about is the third benefit, and that is if I put my $2 million into a fund, and I'm using that $2 million, it could be any number, whatever I put in the fund from that gain, and I hold on to my interest in the fund for 10 years. So at least I cross over the 10-year mark. To the extent that the fund grows my money in whatever investment the fund makes, whatever qualified investment it makes, to the extent it grows it. So let's just say 10 years goes on, and that investment now went from $2 million to $5 million. So I've got a $5 million investment. It's at, I held on to it for 10 years. I'm not forced to sell it at 10 years. In fact, I can keep it until December 31st, 2047. So I can just hold on to it. But eventually, when I do sell it, for that appreciation from 2 to 5 million, that is tax free. So that's what a lot of folks are talking about. Is you got to hold on to the investment for 10 years. So 10 years is a fairly long time.
And while we're on that topic, setting aside the free growth up until potentially 2047, which I think is very attractive to communities like yours and parts in the rural communities, because you can sit there and utilize this as an estate planning tool for really wealth creation for generations to come. But the other thing to think about, as Mark noted, was you hear the intermediary, in this case the opportunity fund. Another context that a lot of you in this room would probably be familiar with, where you're dealing with the intermediary, is a 1031 exchange on real estate. And in that, you have to go out and find a qualified intermediary. You assign over the contract, then and the money goes into escrow. Here, the intermediary can be a fund that you create yourself. It can be a fund you invest in. But the nice thing about this program is you do not have to go out and invest in like-kind property. So at 1031, you sell one type of real estate, you have to go buy a like-kind piece of real estate. Here, you can do, as Mark noted, the Apple stock and take your capital gains from that and then go invest, not in stock again, but in real estate, in an operating business like Mark will talk about. And more importantly, in a 1031, I have to keep my basis that was in there plus whatever growth that I'm looking to defer out. Here, all you have to do is invest your capital gains. So in Mark's example, where you started with $1 million investment and put it free, you can invest any portion of that $2 million. You can invest all the $2 million. You can invest a portion, and whatever you don't invest, you go pay your capital gains tax on. But you can pull your basis back off the table. So if you bought it for $1 million, you pull $1 million back off the table and start operating with that. So there's a lot of flexibility in this program, and a lot of things that can be taken advantage of. Whether you're selling agricultural land or stock or real estate in a non-agricultural setting, you can use some flexibility and some creativity here to take advantage of this program.
And feel free to ask any questions.
Could you talk about losses that, let's say,
That's a great question. So I'm going to do a little skipping around because we have way more slides than this is like the equivalent of like a 3-hour presentation. So we're going to skip through this, but we're going to go right to this. So the question is, I invest, in my example, $2 million into a fund, and the fund loses the money. Or let's just, remember I said that you're taxable on December 31st, 2026? Let's just say that your investment's worth $100,000, and we're in a very bad market, and the fund has lost a lot of money. So what happens here is when you have tax on December 31st, 2026, it's the lesser of the amount of tax, it's the lesser of your gain that you deferred or the fair market value of your investment. Okay? So we're on December 31st, 2026, my $2 million unfortunately is only worth $100,000. That's when I'm going to get taxed on. Likewise, if the fund loses all your money, you will not have any tax to pay. So it's one of the brilliance of this legislation is that they gave us downside protection, which is really important for investors because you just don't know. 10 years is a long time, right? And not even in 10 years, but to get to December 31st, 2026, that's a long time. We can go through a bunch of cycles in the real estate market or the business market between now and then.
Joe, what about income during the time period where you're...
That's a great question too.
Taxable?
That is taxable, yeah. It's growth on the investment. So any income producing property, you'll have income tax to pay, just like any other investment.
So going along with that, there's income, and there also be net distributions out of the opportunity fund?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, and then
What you can't do, one of the questions that we get is, well, it's a 10-year hold. What happens if the fund sells the investment? And can the fund just reinvest that in other qualifying property? Right now, unless they do a legislative fix of this, the answer is no. So basically, you got to look at the investment as a 10-year hold. So whatever that is, as an investor, you got to look long term on this. We're hoping EIG, when they created this legislation, they gave the Treasury Department regulatory authority to what they call the interim gains issue to produce regulations on this. But Treasury has said that they think they need congressional action to fix that. So for right now, you got to look at it as a 10-year hold. And then let's just talk about when do you have to invest, because that's an important question here. So if I sell my stock, I can't sell it to my brother. It has to be an unrelated person. But I have 180 days after my sale to invest in one of these funds. So I have 180 days. Now, one of the questions that came up was, well, what if I'm a member of an LLC, which an LLC or a partnership or even an S corporation, they don't pay taxes at the entity level, they just pass through the taxes to the equity owners. So what if that entity sells stock or sells something or a gain, and they're just allocating that gain to the members? Like, how would the members even know that there was a sale at the entity level to even start the clock on the 180 days? And so what they gave us Treasury gave us regulations a few weeks ago, and they really addressed the issues on this 180-day requirement, and they made it very flexible. So if I'm a partner in a partnership, and the partnership sells an asset for a gain, the partnership could invest directly in a fund, and the partnership will have 180 days. Or me as a partner in a partnership, since that gain is going to get allocated to me, to the extent the partnership doesn't invest, I can invest in the fund. But my 180-day period doesn't start until the last day of the partnership's tax year, which is in most cases, is a calendar year tax year, so that's December 31st. So if I was a partner in a partnership in January, and that partnership had this gain, I don't even start my 180-day period until December 31st of this year. So that gives me a long time to invest in a fund. And so that was a very taxpayer-friendly provision. Anything else we should talk about, Jason, before?
I'd go back to the eligible tax.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. So the question is, like, who can invest in these funds? capital gain here that's taxed in the U.S. to invest in these funds. The other question we get is, we get this often, and that is, what if I don't have a gain and I want to invest in a fund? Do I still get that 10-year benefit? Unfortunately, the answer is no. You have to have a gain. Anyone can invest in one of these funds, but in order to get those 3 tax benefits, you have to, that investment has to relate to a gain. So the key thing here is, and the reason they did that, a lot of folks are like, well, why did they do that? Like, why, and the reason being is that whenever you pass tax legislation, you got to score it. And so what they wanted to do is, any revenue that scores within 10 years, remember when they passed the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, they had a floor that the act itself over a 10-year period could not cost more than $1.5 trillion. And so any revenue that comes in within 10 years, it helps on the scoring. So by having a gain, even though you're deferring it, Congress is, the Treasury Department is still getting that money within 10 years, so that helps on the scoring. So that's why any investment that wants those 3 tax benefits has to be attached to the gain. So,
And I know Mark will go into this in a little greater detail, but in our last presentation over in southwestern Colorado, there were some questions about what happens if an individual is the investor and the individual passes away before the end of the 10-year mark. And I believe that's still kind of an open item. But I would strongly encourage, as you look through that list, and if it's something that's interesting to you, to really think about how you best want to structure the transaction so you aren't running the risk where everything goes back to the individual, but you take the proper mechanism, whether it's a trust or a partnership or any of these up here, just to kind of think through and to make sure that you're properly protected. Because as Mark will get to, and as I said when I first started, at the end of the day, this is a tax vehicle, and so there is a lot of structuring that has to go into it. There's a lot of taxpayer-friendly things about this program, but at the end of the day, it does take a lot of planning and making sure you're doing things the right way. And one of the requirements is that any fund, it has at least, if it's an LLC, and it can't be an LLC, they have to have 2 members. It can't just be a pass-through entity. So you're going to be looking at a 2-member LLC or a limited partnership or something in there where there's at least 2 parties. And so anytime there's 2 parties, there's going to have to be some structuring and making sure things are done right. So if this is of interest to you as an individual, again, just think through that, talk to your accountant, talk to your counsel, and make sure you're planning accordingly to get the ultimate benefit for you and your family.
and I'm going to go back to a slide here. So here's something that's a kind of interesting fact around the program here. So a lot of the tax credit programs, like I do a lot of new market tax credits, which is a great subsidy. So like a $10 million project, you end up with a $2 million subsidy. But unfortunately, with that program, it's capped at $3.5 billion of project costs a year, for a federal program. This has no cap on it. So theoretically, there's a cap, right? If folks don't have gains to invest, then we won't have any investors. But EIG did a study on that, and at first they came up with a number of how much in potential capital could get invested in these funds. First they came up with $2 trillion, and that's a huge number. It's like 2 or 3 trillion. And then they realized, you can also have big corporations that sell subsidiaries, and they have gains too, and they can invest. So they increased that number to $6 trillion. So it really is this unlimited potential for capital to invest in these funds. Because a lot of folks are worried, well, what about my community? This is a federal program, and these opportunity zones are everywhere. In fact, we have a slide on it. And how do I know that there will be capital for my own community? And at least I can say that from an investor perspective, there is so much potential capital there. It's almost an unlimited supply. And I just want to get into a slide of like how many zones, what are these zones? So I'm going to move around. So the country is divided into about 75,000 census tracts. And so they're called population census tracts. So every time they do a census, they pull in all this economic.
Right. So the question is, in 2026, when I'm hit with the income tax on that, what rates do I apply? Is it the rates in 2026, or is it the rates today? So that is a question mark based on the regulations. Probably the portion of the regs that folks are not so excited about is this was basically there's a lot of ambiguity in the regs. This is one of those areas in the regs. They did a really good job of telling us the relationship between the investors and the fund. This is probably the one area where they left kind of open. And I'm telling folks, I would expect the rates to apply in 2026. So the nice thing is that you have this reduction of 15%, right, on the income. So on that $1 million that you invest, you're going to get taxed on $850,000 of it. So that should be a buffer on any rate increases. But certainly between now and then, we probably will see some rate increase, some tax rate increases. So I would expect to apply the 2026 rates for right now. Yeah.
You would think they would grandfather that rate in, or it's possible they could grandfather the rate in when you invest in the fund, if it's projected out?
We would hope, but this is one of these revenue impacts, and if I remember correctly, when they passed this and they did this budget reconciliation, I think they were anticipating the rates to at least be the same as right now, but not go down. Like I think they were anticipating that the rates could increase when they were figuring out the budget impact, meaning that if I remember correctly, they were anticipating that they would get more revenue in 2026 than what they're losing right now. In the sense of they're losing that deferral, but the impact when they passed this, I think they said that this would cost Treasury something like $20 or $30 million, which is a really low number for such a big program. So even though they were losing the deferral, I think they thought that they were going to get back potential rate increases, get back enough revenue to meet that $20 billion number. So, but I don't know the answer with certainty, but I'm certainly telling clients expect the 2026 rates. Oh, back there.
Could you be a little more specific on the original use, hypothetical situation? We live in a rural area here, obviously, farming. You talked about improvements, hypothetically, you have a building that originally was a milk farm, okay? It's no, the dairy is no longer in existence. Someone comes in and buys that building and restructures it, and so it is now holds its equipment, or we've had buildings that as long as they've got the proper walls, they can hold grain. Does that, even though both of them are still fall under the umbrella of agricultural, is that specific change enough where it would not fall under the local use?
Yeah, unfortunately, so that's a really good question. So the original use definition has been used in other programs, other incentive programs. And there's one program in particular that says that if you have a building that's sitting vacant for more than 1 year, and then you come in, you purchase that building, you are now the original user. And these were comments that were provided to Treasury where they specifically said, hey, can you adopt that requirement? I mean, I can't remember which program, it might have been the Gulf Opportunity Zone program that was put in place for Katrina. Treasury didn't do anything on this. And so in fact, in the example they gave us on that 60-40 split, they talk a little bit about land, and they say that you can never be the original user of land because land is permanent. So unfortunately, in your example, I would say that even though you're using it for a different purpose, you're still not the original user. Now that could change, these are just proposed regulations, but that could change, but at least the status today is that all real estate is permanent, you cannot be the original user of that real estate, so you would have to substantially improve.
And to that point, I would say, as Mark noted, the Treasury just came out with these regulations in October, And as you can tell, there's a lot of issues still remaining that are unanswered. We've got a lot of guidance from this first batch. But what we are expecting is as people go to utilize the program and invest in property and operating businesses, there's going to be more questions that come up. And we're part of a national working group that we actually had a call on the way up here today. And part of that national working group is identifying those questions so they can be presented back to Treasury for more guidance. So Treasury has indicated that there's going to be more regulations coming out in various tranches. We would, just a wild guess here, but we're kind of thinking that they might start coming out in two-month intervals as more and more issues pop up. But as Mark said, to your question, great question. You're not going to be the only person who raises that. That's going to be a common question across rural America, and it'll be one that needs to be addressed. So we expect the more time people spend thinking about this and trying to utilize this, the more of those questions are going to be presented, and more often than not, hopefully Treasury will provide some guidance, or maybe Treasury will say, hey, legislature, this requires a legislative fix, you should listen to your constituents. And to that point, I would just say, and Rebecca and I will walk through the maps here shortly, what you're going to see is this program has a very long runway. The 10-year mark we talked about, but also what Mark had said previously about the 2047. There's a long runway to see if this is successful, if people are utilizing it, and given that long runway, and given the fact there are a lot of incentives for individual taxpayers, we think there is going to be a lot of good traction for both red and blue legislators to really sit there and say, hey, this is good for my district, this is good for my constituents. So we're hoping as questions get answered and people take advantage of this, local communities will say they want more of it, states will say they want more of it, and then ultimately our elected officials in DC will also take note of that and fine-tune this and expand it or whatever they need to do to keep this incentive alive.
Yeah, and that's a really good point that Jason makes up, that Jason's talking about, and that is, unlike other pieces of legislation, this one here had bipartisan support as a standalone bill. And these opportunity zones are in rural America, they're in urban America, and so we do believe that to the extent that changes need to be made, they will be made. And it's got, right now it's got a lot of support, we've got a lot of momentum, and so we're hoping that next year we'll see some changes made to this, and in particular addressing your question. Any other questions?
I'm not sure I understand. So let's say you've got a business, or you go into a business and you build a bunch of affordable housing for inside a zone. You're a business that does that. And then you sell some of those houses to individuals to buy with that. That's a sale of the property. So does that, you have to wait 10 years to sell any property?
You do, yeah. I mean, you could sell the property, but you won't enjoy that tax-free appreciation. So if I sell that property for a gain within that 10-year period, that gain just gets allocated to the investors. And so that's why this is a long-term hold. So we've talked to other folks that I've got a client that's doing single-family homes. And what they're doing is they're going to rent these homes out for more than 10 years and then eventually sell them. And so something like that would work. On any multifamily apartment, again, it's a 10-year hold. You have to look at it that way. So now one of the things that folks are talking about doing is you can finance, every one of these deals is going to have debt, right? So you can be in year 7 or 8, and let's just say your property, you built it for $5 million, it's now worth $7 or $8 million. You can put debt on it and pull the proceeds out there to get yourself some cash. You can do that on a tax-free basis. And so that would be one of the strategies to get you through needing liquidity so you can hold for 10 years. Any other questions?
I got a question. So, if you have a fund established and you, let's say that you have multi-units or whatever the case is, but you were to sell some, a property held within that fund, and you didn't take that money, you just put the money back in the fund and used it for other improvements or whatever, but it stayed within, you didn't actually take that money out. Would that be allowable?
Well, it's allowable, but it would be taxable right now. Now, it's interesting, that question is exactly what EIG thought they had in the legislation. Like they provided a section that said to the Treasury Department, you can issue regulations on, they call it the interim gains issue. But Treasury at this point has felt that they need a congressional fix on this particular issue. I mean, this is where there's a little bit of tension between the folks that created the legislation and Treasury, where Treasury is saying, no, that's not enough. You probably need to go back to Congress and get that fixed, because even though the fund is keeping the money, you know, at least they're selling property, but then they're redeploying it in other qualified property. Oops. I don't think I touched one. But right now, again, this is just the status right now. I think that is going to get fixed, but as of right now, if you're going to invest in a fund or you're going to create a fund, you have to look at it as whatever asset, whatever my investment is, I'm staying in for 10 years, and all the assets in the fund are staying in for 10 years. And if you're creating a fund, it's the same thing. Like, you got to look at it and say, I'm holding those assets for 10 years. That's just the status as of today. So, again, this is brand new legislation, and we just we're only on one set of regs. We know there's probably 3 or 4 coming, and these are just proposed. People haven't even commented on the regs yet, so they haven't been finalized. But that's one of the issues.
Thank you.
So why don't we just talk about operating businesses, because you know, we're talking about real estate, but a lot of this program, the folks from EIG thought of this as a way. They were thinking of this as a program for startup businesses located in opportunity zones. I mean, that was kind of their original intention. The real estate industry embraced it, and the rules right now, we know we have a lot more rules coming for operating businesses, but the rules right now, it's easier to do a real estate deal than an operating business deal, but that will change eventually. So for an operating business, here's where the fund goes, makes an equity investment in a business. And we see this working in 3 different situations, and I apologize for moving around here, but I'm going to go to one particular slide, right here. So if you're opening a new business in the zone, there the Opportunity Fund would give you cash equity to open that business. Or if you're already in a zone, you can expand. Now the question is how big of an expansion you need, and that's still an open question. Okay. And then the next situation is like if you relocate a business, you take a business outside the zone, move it into the zone. You still need an expansion element of this, but that would be another application. And then the last application, which this also would work for, is if I buy a business, if I buy the assets of a business, if I buy all the assets, the business is located outside the zone, but I'm going to move the business into the zone, that would work. You know, so of those 4 examples I gave you, the easiest of the 4, because we're waiting for the last set of regulations are going to address the operating businesses. So right now it's the startup businesses, and it's the I purchase a building, purchase a business outside the zone and move it into the zone. So that is really the original intention here. And then there are just a few requirements we can talk about. And you know, these requirements, and this is where the fund invests in a business. There's a requirement that certain requirement that the business, there's activities in the business. You know, so that's not going to be a problem for an operating business. The one issue we have is in the regulations, they added some language. So it's the first requirement here, this 50% of the income needs to be from the active conduct of the trader business. They added on that requirement, it's on the bottom there, in the opportunity zone. And so we don't know what that means yet. You know, what if I'm selling product outside the zone, does that qualify? So here's where we have these open questions that will be answered in the next few months. You know, again, you know, if I'm selling product outside the zone, does that mean I'm not operating in the zone? You know, the other requirement here, well, let me just right here. It's they have businesses that are excluded. They excluded sin businesses, and it's funny, every time I'm in Nevada doing a presentation, folks are always outraged by these, you know, sin business prohibitions. But you know, no gambling, and you know, they've got, you know, a bunch of prohibitions. We get a lot of questions on growler pubs, you know, so, you know, like, you know, what is that? You know, these are, this is I go in, it's a brewery, and the question, there's a prohibition on the sale of business that the principal activity is the sale of alcohol off premises. So if you have these growler pubs where there's, people are eating and drinking in the restaurant, and some are, buying stuff to drink outside the restaurant, does that qualify? So a lot of open issues on the sin business prohibitions, but this has been in the tax code for a bunch of other programs since the 1980s. So it's not a very modern definition here, but something that we have to live with. So that is the operating business. I mean, there's a lot more detail. We're just kind of touching on the basics.
And I know firsthand that Trey is actively utilizing what Mark just talked about of the relocating businesses into an opportunity zone and promoting that. And I just can't stress that enough to all the other economic development folks in the room. And Jan will talk about this. And a lot of credit goes to Governor Hickenlooper and his office, because they did a great job of expanding and really identifying opportunity zones throughout all of Colorado, not just in the metro area or the Front Range. Some of the western states you'll see really focused in more on urban areas. Colorado really spread that out, and as a native of Lamar and Prowers County, I can say that is a great place to grow up, a great place to live. I think you all share that same feeling about Sterling in northeastern Colorado, and that is a story that can be told on an economic development front, that you're not just selling a place to do business, but just a great place to do business and a great place to live. And the cherry on top there is some very attractive incentives for someone to buy and relocate a business and utilize this program. And with that being said, the other thing to keep in mind, and this is for everybody, because a lot of this will tie back to the community on something like that, the work that Trey does and everybody else who's an economic development professional does, is you have to get community support. And so there's a lot of community planning to figure out what types of businesses you want to relocate here, and how do you want to really make yourself attractive and pitch that. And so when you're thinking about that planning process, as of right now, there are no prohibitions of using an opportunity fund as just a portion of the capital stack to make this an attractive program. You can utilize other programs. So, any program that DOLA is using for local issues, or any other program available in Colorado, like the enterprise zones, or I'm on the Great Outdoors Colorado board. We have funded a lot of grants up in northeastern Colorado for parks and open space and trails and the state parks up here. And it's that kind of community planning that the governor's office, especially the Office of Economic Development, and Trey and all of you in this room are really promoting to make sure a rising tide lifts all boats. So it's great if you as an individual can take part and invest, but it's even better if you can take part in, or your community, and expand rural Colorado and bring more jobs out here. Because as Marcus said numerous times, that was really the intent of this program, is to get private capital to invest in those zip codes that over the last 7 or so years did not get the upside that some of the coastal cities or some of your larger cities got.
Yeah, and can't stress enough that this is just the beginning of this program. We have a long runway with it. Again, you know, folks in 2026 will be selling assets and investing in funds. So, you know, most folks think that if you have a program that's 5 years or longer, you can build a business around it. And so that's the same here. And again, you know, with the bipartisan support for this bill, and I've tested that because I've been asked by different municipalities in different areas, whether it's rural or urban, to meet with folks in Congress to talk about, well, you know, their particular area did not get in, and for whatever reason. And, you know, perhaps we can have another round because it only covers 11% of the country. And so I've spoken to folks in Congress, you know, not knowing whether they would be supportive, and I've only got a warm reception on this particular program. So, you know, do I think there's going to be another round? It all depends on whether we get momentum, but I think the takeaway here is that, you know, folks in Congress, we have a lot of support for this. It's a brand new program. It's right now a moving target. We don't have a lot of answers. We're getting some answers, but that's going to change over the next 6 months. So, you know, Jason, me, and Rebecca, we're very positive. And as a firm, we put a lot of resources behind this particular program because we know it's going to be successful. So, should we talk about the maps now? Sure.
So this is a map that shows you all the opportunity zones in the Southwest. And then in particular, these are the opportunity zones in Colorado. And as Jason mentioned, the governor's office did a really good job in the state of Colorado of spreading them out all over the state so that all of the areas can receive the benefit and not just focusing on urban development. So we're going to go through these and just kind of zoom in on different areas. So this is in the downtown Denver area. There's a large opportunity zone near Mile High Stadium. There's an opportunity zone near I-70. There's a lot of development that's already being done in that area.
And just as a point of reference for that is, as you may have followed in the news, near the National Western Stock Show complex. CSU and the city and county of Denver and private developers are really revitalizing that area. There's going to be some work on I-70, which will make your next trip to Denver really enjoyable for the foreseeable future. But that is that area. And if you look around that area, you know, you're not real far from downtown, so it wouldn't jump out at you as this is a distressed area, but if you were to really get down at a micro level in the area, it's a distressed area and one that is ripe for investment. But just as a point of reference, you're really talking about the National Western Stock Show complex area.
And as Jason mentioned earlier, if you're thinking about this from the development side, a lot of these zones are situated in areas where you can utilize other incentives. So when you're looking at these pictures, you know, consider some of these might fall in enterprise zones or maybe areas that where you can utilize like a low-income tax credit and things like that. There's a zone that kind of runs along East Colfax towards Aurora, and if you're familiar with the Children's Hospital and that area. There's also we call it OZONE for short. Opportunity zone areas in Denver National Airport. And then this is just a picture of some of the zones that are located west of downtown Denver, the Lakewood area. There are several zones that go north of Denver. There's one in particular that's near the Boulder Municipal Airport. Boulder is an area that's growing. A lot of tech businesses have been moving out there, so this is an area where relocation of a business would be successful. There's also an opportunity opportunity zone near Broomfield. Same thing when thinking about relocating businesses. There's one that runs along I-76 on the way, from Denver to this portion of the state. And then here's eastern Colorado. You'll see there's one that runs a good way along the eastern side of the state, connected to the northeastern.
Yeah, I think the line of demarcation there is, something correct me if I'm wrong, because the line is right here, but you're looking down there in Kit Carson County, so Burlington, and Lyman area there, the next southeastern. But one of the underlying kind of intents of this project was not just to do real estate investment, but also to think about larger infrastructure investment. And so if you talk to your friends and neighbors in the Burlington area, and even up here where you see the wind farm development, those are the type of projects that could also utilize this and encourage that. So again, if you're thinking about the capital stacks, there's the incentive of the renewable tax credit, and then there's this program. So again, it's just to encourage those types of development and those transmission lines that are running and all those things. And then, as we discussed, just the overlying principle of encouraging private investment out into northeastern Colorado. So there's a lot of ways to utilize this. And again, as a native of the Eastern Plains, you sit here and watch the first few slides of these maps, and it's pretty heavily focused on the Front Range. But again, I can't stress enough just how big the swath of potential opportunity zones are in rural Colorado, especially in northeastern. And that is a big stretch of zones right there that can go for investment. And I won't take Janet's thunder, but I want to say that there was a large percentage, if you were going on a percentage basis, of census tracts that qualified. The majority of them were in the Front Range, but after the governor's office and that office working with economic development folks from across the state, the equitable allocation of opportunity zones designated in Colorado actually broke in favor of rural Colorado, and that is quite a testament if you were to think about those numbers originally.
This is southeastern Colorado again. This is very large zones, and so there's a large portion of southeastern Colorado that qualifies. Here's southwestern Colorado. There's a very large opportunity zone near Grand Junction. Zoom in on that a little bit.
And I would also say this, because this came up, Mark and I were in Durango last week, and so, when you're thinking about southwestern Colorado, you think a lot about real estate development, and it's boom and bust over there, but there's more folks over there that really kind of specialize and niche on that, because that is part of the economy. And what we talked about over there was, always keep in mind what the availability of the zones are in your area. But if there is a certain type of investment that you're very attracted to, or if you are in the real estate game and you're looking at, hey, my community of Sterling, the housing development that I do, or the business, or the real estate development I do, that market's already saturated. Well, that doesn't mean you can't take that down, to the Burlington area, or to Lamar, or La Junta, where you're looking at very similar markets, and you're dealing in something that you're comfortable with. So the reason we want to show all of these opportunity zones is so people can really keep that in mind as they're thinking about if this is something they want to utilize. Is it something they can invest in? Is there a product type that they're interested in investing in? Because again, there's a lot of flexibility in what you can invest in, again, on operating business or real estate, and it doesn't just have to be limited to your community. Investing in community is great, but it also needs to make economic sense. We always talk about that the opportunity zones were not designed to make bad projects good, but to make good projects even better. And so if the deal doesn't pencil out, you don't utilize an opportunity fund to hopefully make it work. use an opportunity fund to just make a good project even better.
Here's some of the opportunity zones in northwestern Colorado. There's a few that are around Colorado Springs and Pueblo. There's one that's near Fort Collins. And then we zoom in here on, this was an interesting one, but there is one near Estes Park.
Yeah, I can say that we're doing these transactions all along the Southwest. But Colorado did a really good job of really spreading out the opportunity zone. Every section of the state has a nice model for particular areas.
And if you're interested in seeing any of these zones closer, I believe if you go to the Office of Economic Development's website, there is an interactive feature where you can see all of the zones in Colorado and then zoom into particular parts of the state.
And so with that, we'll open it up to questions. And I'd also say that we've emailed Trey our presentation, and you all can have that, and I know Trey will make that available. Our contact information is on there. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. We can talk generally about it. But with that, I'm happy to answer any more questions.
You talked about investing in property by purchasing businesses or using property. Does this program also apply to property that you currently own, such as a rental that you reinvest a significant amount of money to improve that property, put back on the market for another 10 years and then sell them? And does it apply to that, or is it something you have to purchase?
Yeah, so I'll repeat the question and make sure I have it correctly. But if you are already operating rental property, correct, and you invest back into that, keep it out on the market for 10 years, Mark can answer this, but there's the slide he showed on the indirect investment where you're investing in an operating business. There would just be some structuring that goes into that. You would need to be not so much investing in your property at that point, but investing in your rental property business. But Mark,
Yeah, so if you have existing property, remember this program is about expansion, right? So if you have existing property, you're allowed to, under the indirect approach, so that's when the fund invests in another entity. That entity has to have 70% qualified property, so that means you could have 30% non-qualified. So if you have property that you own before 2018, it just doesn't qualify. But if you do enough to it, so they can proportionally get to a 70-30 split, 70% good property. So I think if you do the math, it's like if the property is worth $1 million, you have to have $2.5 million of good property to get it that 30-70 split. Then that can be viable. So, but it's more than it's 2.5 times whatever you have. You get in there if you have old property, older than 2018.
So who determines the value of the land and the value of the property? Is that something from the county tax?
Well, if you have a property that's pre-2018, it doesn't matter because none of it is good property. So you have to do enough to it, unless you want to sell it to a fund, and then you could sell it to a fund and let them expand it. And then because you can't be related to the fund, you couldn't take more than a 20% interest in the fund. So you could sell it, and then they could turn it, then it's good property in their hands, and then you can take a 20% interest in that fund, no more than 20%. Or you could keep it, but then you'd have to significantly expand it. I mean, you'd have to do something that's 2.5 times whatever you have right now. So, but the whole idea is that they wanted to do something new.
Well, the reason I asked the question is in our community, there are several properties that are dilapidated enough. Families acquire them through their parents being deceased or whatever. They don't want to put any money in currently, but they don't want to sell it either. So the properties are just sitting vacant and dilapidated when we could use them for rental property or keep on selling it. If the value of that property was increased significantly by them putting money into it and making it available for rental, wouldn't that qualify?
Well, it would be easier if they're dilapidated, if you can get them to sell that property, and then you're buying land in a building, and then all you have to do is just increase, double the basis of the building, right? And that can get you to a qualifying, it's a lot easier to do that than have the current owner, because they've owned it pre-2018, they have to do something. I'm not even sure you can do the math to get there. So you'd have to have 2.5 times whatever it's worth right now, and that's for the whole property. And you'd have to do 2.5 times that value to make it qualify. So it's really, you got to convince them. The best way is to convince them to sell. Maybe if you convince them, because this program again goes through 2026, right? Where people, but so perhaps you can get them to sell that, because if they don't do it now, then after 2026, they're not going to be able to do it then, right? And be able to get there's a little bit of bump, like we've talked to a lot of brokers that say that if you're in an opportunity zone, there's a little bit of bump, right? A little bit of value bump, and so hopefully they'll take advantage of that and sell now.
The program seems right now, as you said, to be weighted towards real estate investments, partly because direct investment in business, you're going to have income coming out of that, right? So you're going to be getting taxed on that operating net income. Hopefully you'll have appreciation on your equity investment nevertheless. But could you speak to, even on the real estate investments, back on that 90%, you can't hold a bunch of cash, in other words. So you've got to deploy the cash fairly quickly, and even with a rental arrangement, you're going to be limited on how much cash the fund has at any time. So could you speak a little bit how that might work?
Yeah, so from a timing perspective, so you have 180 days to invest in the fund. And then the fund has these hard set, right, we don't have a lot of relief at the fund level for how long the fund can hold the cash. So if you were to invest in a fund today, the fund's going to have a penalty if it's holding your cash on December 31st. Unfortunately, the way we didn't get the relief that we thought. We were asking for a 12-month grace period, we did not get that. So then the fund, by December 31st, would have to contribute that cash to a lower tiered entity. And there we do have a grace period. There it can hold cash to acquire and develop property over 31 months. So, but the problem, so a lot of our clients right now are saying, wait a minute, I'm going to do January 1st, because then I'll have till June 30th at the fund level to put that money into a lower tier entity and get an additional 31 months. So right now, we've seen a little bit of brakes put on the program, because folks are now starting to think, if I raise money today, I got to do something by December 31st. Perhaps I just raise it on January 1st. Then I have to June 30th to get it into the lower tier fund, lower tier entity, and then I've got 31 months from there to develop the property. The leasing issue? Yeah, so
That kind of runs along East Colfax towards Aurora, and if you're familiar with the Children's Hospital and that area. There's also we call it OZone for short. Opportunity zone near the Denver National Airport. And then this is just a picture of some of the zones that are located west of downtown Denver, kind of the Lakewood area. There are several zones that go north of Denver. There's one in particular that's near the Boulder Municipal Airport. Boulder is an area that's growing. A lot of tech businesses have been moving out there, so this is an area where relocation of a business would be successful. There's also an opportunity zone near Broomfield. Same thing when thinking about relocating businesses. There's one that runs along I-76 on the way from Denver to this portion of the state. And then here's eastern Colorado. You'll see there's one that runs a good way along the eastern side of the state.
Yeah, I think the line of demarcation there is, someone can correct me if I'm wrong, that's the line right here, but you're looking down there in Kit Carson Pass, so Burlington, and line area there, is the next on the southeastern. But one of the underlying kind of intents of this project was not just to do real estate investment, but also to think about larger infrastructure investment. And so if you talk to your friends and neighbors in the Burlington area, and even up here where you see the wind farm development, those are the type of projects that could also utilize this and encourage that. So again, if you're thinking about the capital stacks, there's the incentive of the renewable tax credit, and then there's this program. So again, it's just to encourage those types of development and those transmission lines that are running and all those things. And then, as we discussed, just the overlying principle of encouraging private investment out into northeastern Colorado. So there's a lot of ways to utilize this. And again, as a native of the Eastern Plains, you know, you sit here and watch the first few slides of these maps, and it's pretty heavily focused on the Front Range. But again, I can't stress enough just how big the swath of potential opportunity zones are in rural Colorado, especially in northeastern. And that is a big stretch of zones right there that can go for investment. And I won't take Janet's thunder, but I want to say that there was a large percentage, if you were going on a percentage basis, of census tracts that qualified. The majority of them were in the Front Range, but after the governor's office and that office working with economic development folks from across the state, the equitable allocation of opportunity zones designated in Colorado actually broke in favor of rural Colorado, and that is quite a testament if you were to think about those numbers originally.
This is southeastern Colorado again. This is very large zones, and so there's a large portion of southeastern Colorado that qualifies. Here's southwestern Colorado. There's a very large opportunity zone near Grand Junction. Zoom in on that a little bit.
And I would also say this, because this came up, Mark and I were in Durango last week, and so, you know, when you're thinking about southwestern Colorado, you think a lot about real estate development, and it's boom and bust over there, but there's more folks over there that really kind of specialize and niche on that because that is part of the economy. And what we talked about over there was, you know, always keep in mind what the availability of the zones are in your area. But if there is a certain type of investment that you're very attracted to, or if you are in the real estate game and you're looking at, hey, my community of Sterling, the housing development that I do, or the business, or the real estate development I do, that market's already saturated. Well, that doesn't mean you can't take that down, you know, to the Burlington area or to Lamar or La Junta, where you're living in very similar markets and you're dealing in something that you're comfortable with. So the reason we want to show all of these opportunity zones is so people can really keep that in mind as they're thinking about if this is something they want to utilize. Is it something they can invest in? Is there a product type that they're interested in investing in? Because again, there's a lot of flexibility in what you can invest in, again, on operating business or real estate, and it doesn't just have to be limited to your community. Investing in community is great, but it also needs to make economic sense. We always talk about the opportunity zones were not designed to make bad projects good, but to make good projects even better. And so if the deal doesn't pencil out, you don't utilize an opportunity fund to hopefully make it work. You know, use an opportunity fund to just make a good project even better.
Here's some of the opportunity zones in northwestern Colorado. There's a few that are around Colorado Springs and Pueblo. There's one that's near Fort Collins. And then we zoom in here on This was an interesting one, but there is one near Estes Park.
Yeah, I can say that we're doing these transactions all around the Southwest. But Colorado did a really good job of really spreading out the opportunity zone. Every section of the state has a nice swath of particular areas.
And if you're interested in seeing any of these zones closer, I believe if you go to the Office of Economic Development's website, there is an interactive feature where you can see all of the zones in Colorado and then zoom into particular parts of the state.
And so with that, we'll open it up to questions. And I'd also say that we've emailed Trey our presentation, and you all can have that, and I know Trey will make that available. Our contact information is on there. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. We can talk generally about it. But with that, I'm happy to answer any more questions.
You talked about investing in property by purchasing businesses or using the property. Does this program also apply to property that you currently own, such as a rental that you reinvest a significant amount of money to improve that property, put back the money to rent for another 10 years and then sell them? And does it apply to that, or is it something you have to purchase?
Yeah, so I'll repeat the question and make sure I had it correctly. But if you are already operating rental property, correct, and you invest back into that, keep it out on the market for 10 years, Mark can answer this, but there's the slide he showed on the indirect investment where you're investing in an operating business. There would just be some structuring that goes into that. You know, you would need to be not so much investing in your property at that point, but investing in your rental property business. But Mark,
Yeah, so if you have existing property, remember this program is about expansion, right? So if you have existing property, you're allowed to, under the indirect approach, so that's the fund invest in another entity. That entity has to have 70% qualified property, so that means you could have 30% non-qualified. So if you have property that you own before 2018, it just doesn't qualify. But if you do enough to it, so that you proportionally get to a 70-30 split, 70% good property. So I think if you do the math, it's like if you, whatever, like if the property is worth $1 million, you have to have $2.5 million of good property to get in that, 30-70 split. Then that can be viable. So, but it's more than, it's 2.5 times whatever you have. You get in there if you have old property, older than 2018.
So who determines the value of the land and the value of the property? Is that something from the county tax?
Well, if you have property that's pre-2018, it doesn't matter because none of it is good property. So you have to do enough to it, unless you want to sell it to a fund, and then you could sell it to a fund and let them expand it. And then because you can't be related to the fund, you couldn't take more than a 20% interest in the fund. So you could sell it, and then they could turn it, then it's good property in their hands, and then you can take a 20% interest in that fund, no more than 20%. Or you could keep it, but then you'd have to significantly expand it. I mean, you'd have to do something that's 2.5 times whatever you have right now. So, but the whole idea is that they wanted to do something new.
Well, the reason I asked the question is in our community, there are several properties that are dilapidated enough. Families acquire them through their parents being deceased or whatever. They don't want to put any money in currently, but they don't want to sell it either. So the properties are just sitting vacant and dilapidated when we could use them for rental property or keep on selling. But if the value of that property was increased significantly by them putting money into it and making it available for rental, wouldn't that qualify?
Well, it'd be easier if they're dilapidated, if you could get them to sell that property, and then you're buying land in a building, and then all you have to do is just increase the, double the basis of the building, right? And that can get you to a qualifying. It's a lot easier to do that than have the current owner, because they've owned it pre-2018, they have to do something that, I'm not even sure you can do the math to get there. So you'd have to have 2.5 times whatever it's worth right now, and that's for the whole property, and you have to do 2.5 times that value to make it qualify. So it's really, you gotta convince them, the best way is to convince them to sell. Maybe if you convince them, because this program, again, goes through 2026, right? Where people, but, you know, so perhaps you can get them to sell that, because if they don't do it now, then after 2026, they're not gonna be able to do it then, right? And be able to get there's been a little bit of bump, like we've talked to a lot of growers that say that if you're in an opportunity zone, there's a little bit of bump, right, a little bit of value bump, and so hopefully they'll take advantage of that and sell now.
The program seems right now, as you said, to be weighted towards like real estate investments, partly because direct investment in business, you're going to have income coming out of that, right? So you're going to be getting taxed on that operating net income. Hopefully you'll have appreciation on your equity investment nevertheless. But could you speak to even on the real estate investments, back on that 90%, you can't hold a bunch of cash, in other words. So you've got to deploy the cash fairly quickly, and even with a rental arrangement, you're going to be limited on how much cash the fund has at any time. So could you speak a little bit how that might work?
Yeah, so from a timing perspective, so you have 180 days to invest in the fund. And then the fund has these hard set, right, we don't have a lot of relief at the fund level for how long the fund can hold the cash. So if you were to invest in a fund today, the fund's going to have a penalty if it's holding your cash on December 31st. Unfortunately, the way we didn't get the relief that we thought. We were asking for a 12-month grace period, we did not get that. So then the fund, by December 31st, would have to contribute that cash to a lower tiered entity. And there we do have a grace period. There it can hold cash to acquire and develop property over 31 months. So, but so a lot of our clients right now are saying, wait a minute, I'm going to do January 1st, because then I'll have till June 30th at the fund level to put that money into a lower tier entity and get an additional 31 months. So right now, we've seen a little bit of brakes put on the program because folks are now starting to think, if I raise money today, I got to do something by December 31st. Perhaps I just raise it on January 1st. Then I have till June 30th to get it into the lower tier fund, lower tier entity, and then I've got 31 months from there to develop the property. Leasing issue? Yeah, so
If you were really looking at growing generational wealth or protecting that into the future while also being somewhat committed to the community, I think you could really do some creative things on an estate planning side to grow your wealth.
And that 2047 date was one of the biggest surprises in the regulations, because one of the legislation said that these zones are only designated for 10 years, and everybody wondered what that meant. Did that mean that at the end of 10 years that I no longer get tax-free appreciation in the zone? And so it was a question that everybody was asking the IRS and Treasury, and then they answered it, gave us an answer that we really liked, and that was that really that 10-year designation doesn't really mean anything from a practical standpoint, but that you have until 2047 to sell your interest in the fund and then get that tax-free growth. And that's a long period of time, because you're going to have folks in 2026 sell assets, invest in the fund, and they still have 20 years.
And along those lines, the other concern that we had was not so much what happens after that is not tax-free, but what if I invest into a fund in 2023, 24, 25? Well, there's no way for me to get to 10 years. And so there was, before these regulations came out, there was a sense of urgency that I really have to go. And some people are able to do that from a sophistication level, and others are sitting there saying, oh, okay, I just really want to think this through and figure out what I want to invest in. So as we noted earlier, you have quite a long runway just to get into a fund. And sure, you might miss out on the deferral of the capital gains, but the real, cherry on top of this program is that tax-free growth. So with new guidance coming out to go out to 2047, again, from a business standpoint, estate planning standpoint, you can really sit there and think about how you want to approach that, how you want to harvest your capital gains.
You have a penalty if it's holding your cash on December 31st. Unfortunately, the way we didn't get the relief that we thought. We were asking for a 12-month grace period. We did not get that. So then the fund, by December 31st, would have to contribute that cash to a lower tiered entity. And there we do have a grace period. There it can hold cash to acquire and develop property over 31 months. So, but the problem, so a lot of our clients right now are saying, wait a minute, I'm going to do January 1st, because then I'll have till June 30th at the fund level to put that money into a lower tiered entity and get an additional 31 months. So right now, we've seen a little bit of brakes put on the program because folks are now starting to think, if I raise money today, I got to do something by December 31st. Perhaps I just raise it on January 1st. Then I have till June 30th to get it into the lower tiered fund, lower tiered entity, and then I've got 31 months from there to develop the property. The leasing issue? Yeah, so we're so the leasing, there's a little bit of an issue right now, and we do a lot of development on tribal land, and so the tribes, they can't sell. They hold their land. It's held by the U.S. government in trust for the tribes, and so the tribes then have to lease the property to private developers who build on that property. And remember, good property is acquired by purchase. Remember, it's acquired from an unrelated person by purchase after 2017. And so right now there's an issue with leasing because that's not an acquisition by purchase. And so we were part of, there were some comments submitted to Treasury a couple months ago on this issue. We're very hopeful it's going to get worked out. But with respect to leasing right now, it just doesn't satisfy that definition. And again, there's my understanding of it's 8,700 of the census tracts are opportunity zones. So 8,700, my understanding is that about 800 of those census tracts are on tribal land. And then you've got a bunch of municipalities and state-owned land that, their intention for economic development is to lease as well. And so this leasing issue is an issue, but there's so much momentum to fix this, and we're hopeful it will get fixed. But if you're thinking about doing a ground lease and developing on that, you might want to put, just wait another few months until this gets resolved.
Just to clarify, back at the beginning, setting up the actual fund itself, is it necessary to set up a fund before you can invest in a project?
Yes, the money has to go into a fund. So the money has to go in a fund first, and then the fund has to deploy. So we have some structure. We have some clients that actually have purchased property where they purchased the property with debt, and then they're bringing in a fund later, and then the fund is going to. So they have formed an LLC, multi-member LLC, purchased property with debt financing, and then they're going to raise money in a fund, have the fund make an equity investment in that LLC that purchased the property with debt, and then use those funds to pay off the debt. So it's a way of reversing it. So you don't have to set up the fund first, but then it's obviously highly structured, but that would be one way to accomplish it, where if you want to buy something first, buy it with debt, and then use the fund to help pay off the debt.
Jason, earlier you mentioned, sorry about that. Earlier you mentioned that this could be used as an estate planning opportunity, and I'm just curious how you foresee that happening.
Well, I think if you think about kind of the long-term play here and who the eligible taxpayers are, you know, so you set up a trust, and that trust invest in the fund, and then it's, you know, you have beneficiaries listed under the trust. You know, if you are thinking in this type of community, where you go buy, let's just use a simple example. Grandma and grandpa no longer want to farm. Kids don't want to farm, and so they're starting to sell off portions of the farm ground. But they're still committed to the community, so they're investing in real estate in the community, or they're investing in a business. And as Mark said, you know, you've got your deferrals on those capital gains, but you also have that potential for tax-free growth out till 2047. And so I don't think there's any contemplation right now of new deadlines. I think you can get on the Office of Economic Development's website, as Rebecca said, to see all of the zones and kind of forward that information on, you know, encouraging folks to take a look and see if there's a way to open up another round to expand. Because you certainly aren't alone in that. When we were over in Durango, there were some neighboring counties outside of La Plata who shared your same feelings.
Quick question, Mark. You mentioned earlier that, you know, an option for pulling out cash later on is to, you know, get additional bank financing and pull cash out. So kind of expanding along that line of thinking, let's say you have, you know, $2 million that you invest into a qualified opportunity fund and into a property, you purchase a property for $1 million, you improve it by $1 million, so it qualifies. You know, if that is the construction and it stabilizes in 2 years or 3 years, can you then get bank debt and pull that cash out?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think the answer is going to be yes. Where Treasury is a little concerned, and they express this in the regs. So in the regulations, you've got the regs, so they're like 75 pages. More than half was, we call it the preamble. So Treasury is writing about, you know, their comments to trying to explain the regs, and then they add a lot of commentary, their feelings on the program. One of the feelings they had was they wanted to keep looking at whether, they wanted to receive some comments on whether taking on debt would be abusive, and where they were going with it is, what if you put $2 million in today, and then tomorrow you put debt on the property and then pull out $1,999,999, right? And you leave $1 in. So that would be abusive. But what they tend to do in the tax code is they tend to say that if you do something after a certain period of time, we'll deem it not to be abusive. And in the tax code, when it comes to partnership tax, 2 years is kind of a magic number. So I wouldn't be surprised if they come out with the next set of regs or the one after where it says something like, as long as you do the cash out refi after 2 years, you're okay. And so I think that's where they'll go with this. I mean, that is, so if you do the math, you have this tax hit in 2026, right? I mean, actually it's April of 2027, but you're still gonna hold on to your interest in the fund for 10 years. So you need liquidity to pay taxes. And so the best way to get that liquidity is some type of refinancing. And that's what our clients who are setting up funds are expecting to do. And so, but that's so far out there that I can't imagine that being a problem. It's just more of the putting on debt right away, pulling out the money, where I can see Treasury saying that's abusive.
And you mentioned certain refinance, but then does that also apply, let's say you purchase that property and it's all cash initially, and then 2 or 3 years to get your initial financing, basically, your initial bank debt, that you still expect that to qualify as well? Do you need bank debt originally?
Oh, you mean the original debt on the purchase?
Let's say there is no original debt.
Oh, okay. So there's no original debt, but then you put debt on the project later? Is that what you're thinking?
Yes.
Yeah, I think there'll be some type of magic window after 2 years. Something like that would be fine. And of course, when the fund or the operating business, the lower tier entity, the opportunity zone business, when it's buying property and developing the property, we absolutely anticipate every deal is going to have a bank loan, right? Every deal is going to have a combination of equity from the fund. You might have other equity where people were like, I don't have any gains, I'm just gonna, invest directly in the project, and then you're gonna have your bank financing. And that is absolutely okay.
If there's in the fund, if I wanted to find out where I wanted to invest money, and let's say I want to go into Denver County or Logan County, is there any database or a way of knowing, is there any funds being set up? Or is anybody, watching over those funds, or is that, to communicate, hey, we have a development fund, we're attracting investors out here, how would we get that message out? Pros and cons of that.
Yeah, so you can do this one of two ways. I mean, you can set up your own fund, be an individual investor and go that way. And then there will also be institutional funds that will be soliciting outside investment with, they're going to have a direct investment strategy. Some are going to be more broad-based. Others are going to be more specific. It's just one of those things. I don't think there's a database available right now. But if you're talking to your financial advisor or you're talking to your investment banker, your banker in general, there are funds that are popping up. You can probably talk to Trey. He might know of some that are floating around that are looking to do business. And so there is going to be that, and you're going to start to see some of those. And I think more on the larger scale, when they're starting to look for outside investment, you'll see probably some solicitation or advertisement if that is a space you play in.
Yeah, and our hope is that you see, funds that are based in the state of Colorado, right? So those, we're certainly seeing the funds already on the coast. The big Wall Street investment banks setting up funds, and then that money, a lot of that money will be what we call agnostic. It's just going to go for the best deal. So the best thing for communities is to have an industry within the state that's looking after the state. And because the barriers to entry are not significant. Self-certification, that encourages more local funds, and I think that's what we'll see here.
Any other questions?
Just practically speaking, you're probably looking at two entities, right? Opportunity zone fund entity, you're almost always going to have a tier entity for practical purposes. Is that just
That is absolutely correct.
two
Yeah.
entities at least?
That was the takeaway from the regulations. It's really hard to
Do it from the fund.
Yeah, because you don't have that grace period, and cash is a bad asset. What else is a bad asset is intangible property, right? And so the fund itself will almost all the time invest in a lower tier entity.
Okay, well, thank you very much for having us.
And thank you. I'm going to call Janet Persky to the stage. Janet is the Strategic Initiative Manager for the Colorado Office of Economic Development and International Trade, and she's going to discuss what it is currently, what steps what it is currently taking to advocate and promote the Opportunity Zone program here in Colorado. Janet?
While Trey's getting that set up, I can start. As Greg mentioned, my name is Janet Persky. I'm the Opportunity Zone Program Manager for the state of Colorado. And just wanted to briefly talk about some of the things that the state has and will be doing to support, some of the questions people are asking about how to find funds or how to find investment. If you may have noticed that throughout Mark and Jason and Rebecca's presentation, there's no mention of an application process. There's no mention of, you have to go and get government approval for these projects, anything like that. The entire program is through self-certification. and on your tax returns. And so that means that if you don't want to, you actually don't have to come talk to me ever. You can just go off and do your investments. And that's something that's really exciting about the incentive, because it allows things to move at market speed. It reduces the bureaucracy. There's no cap on the amount of money. As Mark mentioned, there's no cap on the amount of money that can go through this or anything like that. But what we at the state think is that there is a role for the state to play in using this incentive for what it's truly designed for, which is investment that will benefit communities around the state. And so we built a little bit of a program around that I've been working on that will help. The goal is to drive investment, all these pools of capital that we're seeing around the country, and drive it to Colorado and use it to truly benefit our communities. So there's kind of 3 streams of work that we are thinking about. The first is the nomination process, and this is totally done. As Mark mentioned, there's no ability to change the zones without reauthorization or anything like that. But I think it's just important to say where it came from, because I think it helps, underscore the state's intentions with the program. So as Mark mentioned, we had 3 months at the beginning of the year to nominate all the zones, and there are 3 factors that we were thinking about when designating the zones. The first was true economic distress. Based on the index, there's a certain number of zones that qualify as distressed, but knowing the local context gives a little bit more color to that. So for example, a lot of the areas around universities is often low income because students don't have income. But the area around CU Boulder doesn't necessarily need this incentive. So making sure that it was going into places that truly needed it. The second is making sure that it was zones that could both attract and absorb investment. So that means that there was enough there that it could capture the interest of an investor, and be able to show some potential for growth or for return, but also that investment would be positive. So some of the areas in Denver, for example, Rhino is eligible for this incentive, but folks that know Rhino know it's been booming over the past 5 to 10 years, and this incentive might actually be detrimental because it might increase displacement and gentrification. As opposed to some of the other areas where additional investment would be really positive for the community. And then the third factor was statewide equity. As Jason started to lay out, when you kind of just first looked at the data, about 70 to 80% of our eligible zones were in the urban corridor, were in the Front Range. And that's kind of where the metrics said to drive investment, but knowing our state and knowing the challenges that the rural areas face and the benefits that this type of incentive could have for the rural areas, we pretty intentionally flipped that list. So now about 40% of the zones are in the urban corridor and 60% of them are outside the Front Range. And so you can go to our map, choosecolorado.com/OZ, and see as Jason and Rebecca went through, the zones are all over the state. Eastern Plains, Western Slope, some in the Denver metro area. We relied a lot on folks like Trey and Greg and the other economic developers in the room to kind of provide feedback on where this type of designation could be truly catalytic. And then, so the second thing we've been working on since those zones were all designated and certified has been educational efforts. And I'll just underscore, choosecolorado.com has a bunch of the resources. The article, choosecolorado.com/OZ, it has articles that Mark and others have written. It has some of the tools. There's a bunch of data tools that you can use to see, what areas are eligible, more explanations from accountants. That's where you can also sign up for a mailing list where we do send out, when Treasury releases additional regulations or things like that. We have additional events. You can sign up for a newsletter that comes out roughly once a month, but it depends a little bit on what's going on. And then the third thing that we're working on is investment facilitation. And this is where we really look to all the folks in the room. There's 2 sides to this. First is identifying investable opportunities, and then the second is identifying investors. And we're working on both sides of that equation, but primarily on the identifying investable opportunities side of it. So I've been traveling to communities around the state, have been up here in Sterling and Logan County with some of the folks up here a couple times to start to think through, how this area can attract investment. And there's a couple things we think about. The first is developing a prospectus that tells the story of your community. Why, if you're an investor in Sterling, why is that project going to make money for you over the next, 5 to 7 to 10 years? And so that's kind of the high-level story of the workforce, the demographics, the opportunity, the growth, and then drilling down into specific projects and helping communities identify, a lot of communities, for example, have housing, but it's pretty difficult to go to an investor and say, we have this plot of land, we want housing. It's a lot more effective if you can go to that investor and say, we have this plot of land, we think it's appropriate for 10 different townhomes, and if you give $10 million of equity, you're gonna see a 15% return because of X, Y, and Z. And by the way, if we as a community can layer on these additional incentives as appropriate, whether that's enterprise zones, whether that's fast tracking permitting, whether that's TIF districts, that project will now see an 18% return. So adding that level of specificity and that level of attractiveness to the projects, we think will really help see investment. And so just to quickly highlight a couple of the tools that we have available, we have prospectus templates. We have lists of lawyers and accountants that can help work out these deals. DOLA has grant money available for communities to either help with the prospectus building or to help with technical support on some of those particular projects. Not to negotiate it all the way through, but to get from that step of we want housing and we have this plot of land to here's what the capital structure could look like and here's what our strategy for attracting investment is. And then the final thing, to the question about how to identify funds or how to find projects, we're building out a website right now that should be live a couple weeks after Thanksgiving. One side of the website will be opportunity zone marketing, so kind of telling that story at the state level, at the regional level, and then looking to the community development folks to fill in a specific story for your zone, but providing kind of a library for that. So if people are looking nationally, they know, they can see the story of Sterling. If that wasn't a place that would originally kind of have popped to their radar, but now they see it on the opportunity zone map, they can see that. And then the other side of the website is going to be a project database. We kind of call it the investment dating website, where an investor can go on and upload their profile and say, I'm looking for real estate of $50 million in infrastructure, and then the real estate developer can upload their project information, and then you can search through and find each other. So we hope that that will be, again, both a clearinghouse for national folks that are looking here, and an opportunity for local investors to kind of organize themselves in projects and see what's going on in their community. So I'll just close with a little story. We don't think opportunity zones are going to solve every problem that Colorado faces. We don't think, it's not every project is well suited for an opportunity zone, but we think we'll see benefits in a couple different ways. The city of Montrose was featured in a Forbes article about opportunity zones alongside Stockton, Newark, and I think maybe one other place. And a developer in Montrose got 4 or 5 calls in the next 2 weeks saying, what are your $50 million projects in Montrose? And the response is, well, maybe you should do your due diligence a little bit. There's not many $50 million projects in Montrose. But I think that, the two benefits of this incentive, beyond just the financial benefits, is it'll get folks to look at the map. Those folks probably have never heard of Montrose before. And maybe Montrose isn't the best place for those investments, but people are looking at the map and seeing, these are the yellow zones, let me see what's there. And then the second piece is the community organization piece, that as different communities and economic developers have kind of gone through this process of identifying what they want and what they need and how to bring capital to their communities, it's going to benefit the community, and it's going to benefit the community beyond just the opportunity zone. Because that sort of thinking is helpful for the region, and we can see a way in which a rising tide lifts all boats. If there's an area within a zone that you're really trying to attract businesses to, and those businesses need workforce housing, that housing can be built outside the zone, and it doesn't get the incentives, but the housing supports the businesses, and then the businesses can come into the zone and get equity, and then that supports the housing. So don't think that, the incentive is limited to the yellow grids on the map, but we really think that the benefits can be seen in a lot of different ways and can have trickle down in the right types of situations. So I just encourage anyone, feel free to reach out. Our website is the most useful place to start, but if it's helpful, like I said, I can connect you to folks like Mark and Jason and Rebecca and some of the other experts, or answer any questions you have, or come back out to communities to talk about this. We're really excited about this incentive, and really excited to see all the energy up here in Northeast Colorado. Thank you. So now I'm going to, just to find This might be the most exciting speaker of the night. I'm going to introduce Chris Montgomery of 4 Point Funding. Chris has set up the Rural Cause, which is an opportunity zone, an opportunity fund based out of Steamboat that's particularly looking to invest in opportunities in rural Colorado. 4 Points and Rural Cause have been a great partner for Aletta in helping to build out an ecosystem and opportunity zones, and Chris is going to talk a little bit about the work that they're doing in what he's doing.
Thanks, man. I'll be excited to spend it really brief because I know it's already after 5. So we are setting a fund focused exclusively on investing in opportunity zones in rural Colorado. We've been investing in real estate, done a little over 300 projects as a principal in Western Colorado, and we've also, our goal is to be investing, just to expand that, explicitly in opportunity zones. We haven't been able to find a good tax attorney yet, so we're kind of struggling. No, we're working on it. But we, the plan for us long-term is to be investing in both the business and the real estate side of this opportunity. As Mark indicated, there's some questions that are unanswered. We haven't changed that plan, but they put the business investing on hold within the opportunity zones for a few months until we get this figured out and until we get the clarity. We're also initially thinking about raising a large fund, go raise a $50 or $100 million fund and tackle multiple projects within that fund. Because of the guidance that came out, because of the advice we've received, at the moment what we're going to do is we're going to set up one fund per project and invest in that project. The investors can invest into our fund, into one project or into multiple projects as they go. We're working on setting that up now, so we're actively, one of the reasons we're here primarily is to just show our support for rural Colorado, but most importantly for us is to identify projects. So we're looking at projects in Estes Park and Sterling and in Fort Morgan, in counties all across the rural area. And for us, rural really means anything outside of Denver and Boulder. They've got plenty of progress already happening there, and we want to support the rural community. So we're really here to, independently, if you've got projects and you'd like to talk, please come do it. If you've got capital and you'd like to talk about how you could invest in a fund, we'd like to answer that as specifically as we can. I'm not going to do a big speech right now. But we'd be happy to talk to you about that as specific as you would like to. And with that too, there's a real opportunity to make a difference in these communities starting now. So we're launching and moving forward. There's a lot of vagaries on the outsides of the law that Mark, Jason, and his team have talked about. We're going to do right down the middle of the highway. So equity investing into real estate projects that we intend to hold for more than 10 years. That's the only thing we're going to move forward with right now. As he also mentioned, we're not going to accept capital. We've had calls every day saying, I've got my 180-day clock, can you accept money today? No, not today. January 1st, January 1st-ish, we expect to be ready to roll and accept money. But for us, it's about being conservative with this too. These are hard-earned capital gains. This is not to go be, high-risk investment for us. This is to go be on the cautious side. There's a fiduciary duty back to the investors. So we're going to be cautious. We want to go within the guidelines, but we also want to build that momentum and move forward. So I'm not going to take questions now, but I'm going to be around, so happy to talk about any of that. Eventually, we will get to maybe building condos that we can sell off, as was discussed. Eventually, we'll get to direct investment in business, waiting for the guidelines. For now, right down the center of the highway, but we're looking for projects right now, and we'll be looking for investors soon. So be happy to talk about that. Thank you.
I've been asked to provide the closing comment, and so I'll just start by noting that every business requires a compelling concept, excellent execution, and access to capital. And for that reason, I think today's workshop has been extremely valuable for me, and I hope for everybody else here in the audience. I would like to call our presenters back up to the stage. We have a small gift, and along with that, ask Trey to join them. There's a local business here in Sterling, High Plains Spice Company. And so, as a gift of thanks, or show of thanks to everybody who was part of this panel, I would like to give you their beef box spice package. And feel that that's especially appropriate given Northeast Colorado's strengths in agriculture and food processing. So thank you to everybody, and a special note of thanks to Trey for all of his hard work in putting this program together. Without Trey's initiative, none of this could have been possible. So thank you again.
And with that, there's cookies, brownies, and coffee, and tea. Help yourself.
I couldn't hear. It's acoustic. Did you have a hard time? I always do. Yeah, me too. But it's like, really, what am I doing?
You need a 4-H, my dear.